Hey guys, so today going to talk a little bit about tools used for preparing soil, and um, if you guys didn't see in a previous video, this is an area where we removed several inches of soil where we had some flower and shrub plantings that weren't really doing that well anymore, and we're going to convert it to vegetable gardening. So I wanted to show you guys kind of what you need to do that if you're just getting started out, and I kind of laid the tools out in the order that you're probably going to use them. First thing I would recommend are gloves. You can get those cheap, I don't know, they're probably still only $2 or $3 at most hardware stores, Home Depot, Lowe's. They're like gray suede, but they've got fabric backing. I prefer these Kinko leather gloves, especially if I'm going to be working with anything that could potentially be hot, or if I'm working with like chainsaw or other sharp equipment, just because those cheaper gloves have a fabric backing that will burn right through, will cut right through. This actually offers protection all the way around your hands, and you still have a fair amount of dexterity. So I don't know, I got these for probably $10–12, so they're a little bit more expensive, but I think they're worth it. The next thing you might need, depending on how overgrown the area is, if you're just restarting a derelict garden that's still basically just a garden bed that hasn't been worked in a couple years, you might not need a lot of this. But if you're actually working from basically bare ground up, probably going to start with loppers to remove anything brushy above ground. I like the Fiskars. I would recommend going with a medium duty. So you can see here it's got like a separate bar for leverage. The cheaper ones are just it's just two pieces. They're not cheaper. I mean, they're a little bit less expensive. I shouldn't say they're lower quality, but those are really designed for like cutting fairly minimal things. With something like this, you can actually cut down all the way up to small trees. So I would go with a medium duty to heavy duty loppers. You just have more capability that way. So we do have like a little ceiling here. I'll cut him out of the way. Next, probably going to want a leaf rake just to clear leaves, debris, stuff like that off the surface. Diseased plants, if it's an area where you've grown the same crops before. Little trick I like, it might seem a little silly, but it actually works pretty well. I use a snow shovel. If you had one of the big like stainless scoops instead of a plastic snow shovel, that might work even better. But I just use this basically as a dustpan. Rake debris into that. Works pretty well. So you're not constantly bending over, picking stuff up. And then I just dump that in the wheelbarrow. Honestly, guys, if you're just getting into gardening or homesteading, get a wheelbarrow if you don't already have one. It's well worth the investment. And I think for a lot of people, going with like a yard tractor and a trailer is overkill. Obviously, it depends on what kind of physical condition you are in, how much property you have. We only have about an acre. If I had 10 or 15 acres, then yes, power equipment, yard tractors would probably make sense. But we don't, and they don't for us. This next piece, in this part of the world, this is called a grub hoe. It's got like a small axe on there that you can use. It's not meant for chopping trees. This is mostly meant for chopping roots. This, I guess you would call it hoe part, also works pretty well for cutting roots. Here in New England, you're going to have woody roots in the ground. You're going to have rocks that you need to try to dislodge. I'll show you guys. That didn't take, I didn't even have to swing that hard. But that small tree that was growing, I left a little bit in the ground. You're not really going to want to cut through the dirty parts with a lopper. You're going to dull your blade pretty quick. But that grub hoe or mattock is great for busting up those roots. Along with that, especially if you've got rocky soil, if you're in New England, but even if you don't, if you're just trying to break up root systems, weedy root systems, this actually isn't even that bad. Here. But this is a digging fork. Some people, the uninitiated might call it a pitchfork. It's not a pitchfork, guys. Pitchforks have much finer teeth, and they're meant for pitching hay, stuff like that. This is meant for digging. Also, if you're going to grow any kind of root crops like carrots, potatoes, this might be helpful to loosen them up. There is a learning curve, so you're not puncturing the tubers or busting them up, but that's useful for harvesting as well. And really what I use it for, is like I said, any kind of hard packed soil with rocks or roots, just loosen it up. And then you can use a spade. Spade is the pointed shovel, guys. If it's like flat in the front, that's for transferring material. You want a spade. So make sure if you're going to a hardware store, you'll probably be able to find them yourself. But if you're asking, make sure you're specific enough because there's a lot of different types of shovels. So we just showed a snow shovel. There's a transfer shovel. This is a spade. And at this point, we're actually removing some of this soil because I addressed in an earlier video, we had some construction scraps sit here that we just want to make sure we don't have contaminants in the soil. So, but it goes a lot easier. If I'm trying to dig it where there's a lot of roots, a lot of rocks, it's actually pretty difficult to dig with a spade. So having a digging fork to break that up is certainly helpful. You can grab a couple other things here. Another thing you're going to want is an iron rake like this. Just helps rake up things that are a little bit too stubborn, a little bit too stiff for that flexible leaf rake to get. Then, once you've got it down to the soil that you want to work with, we are going to be adding some Miracle-Gro raised bed soil to this, along with some soil amendments. I'll show that in a separate video. But to mix different kinds of dirt together, mix amendments in, you're probably going to want a hand cultivator. This isn't really a hoe. This one has 3 tines. It's pretty beefy. This is just a different style, finer tines. Probably depends on what kind of soil you're working with. If you're working around less than ideal soil with rocks and things like that, you may want heavier tines. This finer tine one might work better if you're working in added soil, like if you're buying bag mix like we're going to add here as the top layer. This might work better at that point. I want to show this. I had to dig out of the shed because I don't use it too much. I'm not going to disparage the particular brand. This might work for some people. It's supposedly a cultivator that you can dig into the ground and twist. Honestly, if you're in good physical shape, I don't feel that this works very well. I feel like it's more work to turn less soil than just using some of the other tools I just showed you, like a hand cultivator. Now, that's for somebody in my physical condition. This might work better in like an established garden where you just need to freshen things up a little bit in the spring. If I was more frail, say I was a 60-year-old woman getting into gardening, this style might work. For me, it's kind of a waste. I never use it because it doesn't work that well for my purposes. Just another example, guys. You might see these little hand cultivators. They're only about this long. I think this one came with like a little garden trowel. This is good for if you've already got established gardens and you're just trying to work some weeds that are around your plantings. There's nothing wrong with this. This is not what you want to use if you're establishing a garden, guys. You're going to be bent over a lot more than you need to be. You don't have the leverage you need to really work that soil. Again, for me, somebody who's physically limited, this might work well for you. I can only speak from my own experience. And then lastly, if you're preparing a new garden bed like this, after you add the new soil and the amendments, if it's going to sit for a while, and this will here, because like I said, we're still early April, our last frost date is still 5-6 weeks away. Makes sense to tarp that area, guys, so that you don't have weeds growing up, or if they do germinate, it's going to keep them pretty suppressed. Otherwise, by the time you get back to this, like in our case, probably late May to early June, you're going to have weeds that have come. You've planted a weed garden. You're going to be fighting weeds that didn't need to be there. So just, it can be a light duty tarp. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. I would recommend tarping for weeds. All right, guys, so that's it. I hope this was helpful, showing you some of the tools that would be useful to get started. For the most part, if you've got that suite of tools, that's most of what you're going to need for gardening throughout the year, to be honest with you. Again, depending on what you're doing. So that's it for this time. Please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And I'll shoot a follow-up video where we do some soil amendment here so you guys can see that process too.